Hey guys, HalfClickUp here. Welcome back to my Yamaha FZ6R mods and maintenance playlist. In today's video, we will be performing a long overdue valve adjustment on our 2009 Yamaha FZ6R. Now Yamaha calls for a valve adjustment on this motorcycle every 24,000 miles. Now this bike in particular is about to turn 58,000 miles. Now with that being said, obviously it's long overdue. And it'll also be quite interesting to see exactly how tight our valve tolerances have gotten over 58,000 miles with never being adjusted. Now this motorcycle is symptomatic of needing a valve adjustment. When the temperatures are very cold outside, like in the winter time, the bike will not hold idle until the engine is almost completely up to temperature. And so with that being said, that's a pretty good indication that our valves are out of spec. In particular, the valves are too tight. The clearances are too tight. Now this is a big job, so before we dive into this thing, let's take a look at our parts table and see what all is involved. What all do you need to perform this job correctly? And when I say correctly, I mean to the specifications provided to you in the Yamaha service manual for the FZ6R. So taking a look at our work table here, obviously you're going to need a service manual. This can be found online, it's free. I will drop a link to my personal Dropbox down below in the description to where you can download this manual yourself. Moving on to all the parts. Not only will we be adjusting the valves, but we're also going to go ahead and change the timing chain. And when you change a timing chain, you want to match new sprockets to that. So we're going to swap the cam sprockets as well. When I start this motorcycle on a cold start, I get a lot of rattling out of the timing cover just for a few seconds. So my assumption is that the timing chain on the bike is stretched. And we'll compare this brand new one to the one that's in the bike here in a little while and see if it is stretched more than this brand new piece here. Now here's our various cover gaskets. We're going to have to remove our spark plugs so we can turn the engine over when we do this adjustment to get top dead center on each piston. So I went ahead and picked up some new spark plugs. I mean, why not? We're in there, we might as well change them out. Same thing with the cam gears and the timing chain. It's like I'll probably never, at 58,000 miles, I'll probably never open this motorcycle's the top of the engine again. So I might as well make sure I cover all the bases while I'm in there. Valve cover gasket, again, different cover gaskets, you know, timing cover, chain tensioner gasket. This is the little brass gasket that goes right in the middle of the timing cover. Got to replace that too. This is a valve lapper. This is for removing the valve lifters to get to your shims inside. Not required. A lot of guys use a magnet, and I very well may be using a magnet, but according to the service manual, I wanted to see if maybe I would find use out of the valve lapper, and it's just like $7 or $8, so I picked one up anyways. You're gonna need a shim kit. Otherwise, you've got to open up the motorcycle, figure out what size shims you need, and then just buy those individual shims. Unless you want your bike down for an extended period of time, you probably want to avoid that. So I picked up an entire shim kit. This one is by Hot Cams. This is a specialty tool. It's a Yamaha part number. This is a cam sprocket wrench, and it'll also work on the timing rotor to hold it in place. This is a set of offset feeler gauges. This is an actual Yamaha piece, Yamaha part number, and these were very expensive, but I'm really insistent on doing everything by the service manual. The service manual has all of these Yamaha specialty tool part numbers, and I went ahead and picked up the actual set that the service manual calls for. That's just how I roll, guys. I'm trying to be as methodical as possible in this job. This is assembly lube. This is just Permatex. Good stuff. It's got great reviews. We're gonna have to lube up the cams and the journals and all that when we put the camshafts back together. This is Yamabond. This is going to be used to supplement the valve cover gasket, because there are little journals, little channels that, from what I understand, this gasket won't completely touch, and so you have to supplement inside those channels with this Yamabond It's basically RTV, guys, but again, I'm going by the book. I'm getting all the stuff Yamaha factory repair places use, you know, like what the dealership would use, all of this stuff, Yamaha part numbers. In case you're wondering, this is some old Motul. I have drained the motorcycle of all its oil because we're performing an oil change all at the same time. And when you put the cams back in, the cam cap covers, the cam caps, the bolts, the threads need to be lubricated with engine oil. Again, according to our service manual. So I harvested some of the old Motul so that we can dip the threads into this when we put it back together. Now you guys didn't think I was going to make you jot down all these part numbers that quick, right? Here's a spreadsheet. I got you. Screenshot that. Now at this stage of the motorcycle's disassembly, it's just like as if you were doing a spark plug swap, right? Just tear it down, except for the tank being removed. I don't typically remove the fuel tank when I do a spark plug swap. I typically just prop the tank up with a plank of wood. So that's where we're at, guys. The next step is going to be to get the throttle body assembly out of the way. Now it can't come out completely without disconnecting the coolant line. We're not going to disconnect the coolant line because we're not doing a coolant flush. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the throttle body assembly as much as we can, and what that means is we're just going to get it out of the way. Now just real quick, here's some of the challenges we're going to face. For one, we are not going to be able to use our torque specs. Maybe on this one, and this one when we put the valve cover back on. But if you guys look back here, now I understand that the plug wires are in the way. They'll be out of the way shortly. But still, look at the clearance between the valve cover bolt and the frame of the motorcycle. My torque wrench is not going to fit in there. There's not enough clearance. In fact, I don't know of any torque wrench on the planet that will fit inside that tight of a clearance. At least mine won't. How else do you propose we get any kind of a torque wrench in there, you know? So that'll be a thing. We'll worry about that when we get there. The other thing about it is the fact that the engine is mounted at a cant. It's canted, right? It is tilted like 45 degrees that way towards the front of the bike. So once we get the valve cover off, we'll see how much of a challenge it'll be to just kind of hold everything in place. I guess what I'm getting at is the only way to properly do this with everything torqued to factory spec is literally to remove the engine from the motorcycle, and we are not about to do all that. Alright, first things first, we got to remove this plate to get to our throttle cables. We got to disconnect the throttle cables so that we can move the throttle body assembly out of the way. Number 5 hex key and a size 12 socket. Now to remove the throttle cable plate, you have 2 Phillips heads right here. Then you've got to kind of fish these cables out, man. You have to get some slack on the cable there and rotate it in such a way where this pin, this locking pin, pops out like so. Alright, just kind of shimmy that out of the way, let her hang there. Looks like this will wedge in right here. Ugh, just fine. Where there's a will, there's a way, guys. Now the way you go about removing the throttle body assembly is it's pretty tight, guys. I ain't gonna lie. You've got to make a contraption, and I'll show it to you in a minute. But see this guy right here? Right there. That piece of thread. On the other side of that thread is a number 3 hex head bolt. Alright, and it's a clamp. So each intake runner has a clamp like that that is holding the bottom of each throttle body on there. And it's unusual the way Yamaha did this, and I'll explain. The cylinder number 1 and cylinder number 2 bolts on these clamps are facing this way to be accessed from that side. The bolts on 3 and 4 are facing this way to be accessed from this side. Now, wouldn't it make more sense to you to go in this way on these two and then that way on those two? I mean, is that just me or what? So what you got to do is you got to put together a 1/4 inch contraption, a hyperextension, man. And what we're gonna, I know it's ridiculous, but this is what's required. I'm gonna see how I can set the camera up so you guys can see this in action. Stand by. All right, the first one's in. It also helps that you use a wobble extension because it's so dang tight that you, if you don't have a wobble effect to it, you just won't be able to get precisely where you need to on that bolt head, guys. And what I'm doing is I'm just loosening these things, right? I'm loosening them so that they give up their grip and the throttle bodies can come off. All right, let's hit number 2. All right, number 2's done. All right, number 3's loose. All right, so all 4 are loosened. Theoretically, it should just pop right off. Alright, so this is your coolant hose that remains attached. You also have one running down below here that goes to the head. That stays attached as well. So the best you can do is kind of just prop it out of the way. I'll probably zip tie this, and that'll give us good access for taking the valve cover out this way. There. Ridiculous, I know, but it works. Look at that. That's 5 zip ties around the shock mount here, the monoshock mount. All right, so you want to stuff some rags down in there. And by the way, how did I know that removing the throttle bodies was the next step? Well, remember guys, we have our service manual here. We're just going in order. Just follow the instructions. All the way down, throttle bodies have been removed. Our AIS is deleted. Spark plugs. There we go. Let's remove the spark plugs. And we're gonna go ahead and zip tie these out of the way too. Just went to the ram mount with it. Gotta be creative, guys. And if you're curious, there's the plug condition. They're not terrible, man. As long as they're not wet, right? Your plugs are wet, worry. All right, next step, valve cover.
That was the top right hand corner. Whew. Well guys, that was looking at the timer here, that took about 15 minutes to get all of those bolts out. That was that one back there, the top right bolt was hell to get out. I mean, with that little Allen key trying to get a bite over and over again, and they don't get loose until they're already, you know, almost completely threaded out. That's when they get loose, or at least mine. So anyways, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, we got this coolant hose we have to finagle out of the way. Valve cover's ready to come off. I don't know how difficult it's going to be wrestling with this, but here we go. I came at the corner with a flathead. Had to pry it. Took a minute to finesse it, but here it comes. And I went ahead and came down to the top left corner as well. So basically each corner kind of just do a little boop and it'll start popping up. Alright, let me show y'all something. It comes up just fine, but back there it is way too tight. You can't squeeze these coolant hoses at all to get that back corner up and off. I mean, I've been fighting with this thing for a minute. I actually had to cut away to wrestle with it off camera, but I can't get it, dude. Like, it will not clear the camshaft sprockets. The one sprocket on the exhaust side up here. So I'm gonna grab my chair because my back is killing me, guys. Oh. Whew. So the hoses run through right here and they attach right here on the radiator. I'm about to pop these clamps off, and I got a rag. I'm going to catch whatever coolant comes out. I don't know how much is going to come out. It just runs through the throttle bodies. I don't know that any coolant is stored up there in the throttle bodies, so there might not be much at all that comes out. But dude, I can't wrestle that thing out of there with these two hoses in the way. It's too tight. So we're going to disconnect from the radiator, and well, you know what, matter of fact, this is real time, folks. We're learning together, right? It doesn't mention anywhere in the manual that these hoses need to be removed, but it does mention that the throttle bodies are supposed to be completely removed, which we're avoiding having to do. What if we just disconnect the coolant hose from the throttle body assembly and snake it out of here and just kind of poof, stick it, route it down this way? I'll bet you then she'll come right out. Let's try and do that instead of coming at the rad itself. Let's do that. Whoa, there's a little bit. There's a little bit. Alright, that towel seems to be holding it inside the throttle body. It's not squirting out. We're going to route the thing down and out the bottom here. Where's my hand? Whew. Here. Okay. That'll work. Just like that, guys. She's coming out.
Well, there she is.
Of course, we'll be replacing this gasket. Hey, also guys, off camera, I noticed that this coolant temperature sensor, which clips right there into the block, was in a bind, and so I unclipped it, and it relieved a lot of pressure off of the throttle body. So the throttle body is way happier now. There's no doesn't appear to be any damage to the connector or anything, but it was pulled pretty taut, so that it's a lot more better now. All right, without further ado, guys, hey, tell you what, let me grab the light. About 58,000 miles worth. I mean, I guess if you it's nothing spectacular to look at. If you've seen one, you've seen them all, I suppose. I'm curious about the timing chain. We'll get to that in a second. See if it's actually loose or stretched. Yeah. All right. I guess there's no turning back now. Okay, so done. Remove pickup rotor cover. Alright, guys. We'll go over our instructions. You notice the manual does have these tips. Always pay attention to the tips. They're very helpful. For whatever reason, it's recommended that you treat this timing cover as if it's a wheel. You know how you do a wheel in a star pattern to make sure it's torqued evenly? Even when you loosen this thing, it's recommended that you loosen it in a staggered and in a crisscross pattern. So we're gonna have to be sure we do that, but timing cover's coming off next. And yeah, I'll just state the obvious. This bike has been dropped. It's gouged pretty good on the timing cover. It wasn't me. It was either the first or the second owner. I don't know that much of its history, but it did slide on this timing cover at some point in her life. But these are actually kind of expensive, man. They're 80 bucks to replace these things, and I'm just not trying to do all that right now. Now I'm just going to lift the timing cover up, and it tucks away nicely on top of the oil fill spot here, up here on the crankcase. It just kind of sits there. Alright, so with that out of the way, let us remove our gasket. Now this is a metal gasket that could be reused, but again guys, we're going by the service manual, so we have a brand new one of these. And also, there is our little brass gasket right inside there. I'm gonna grab a pick, we're gonna get that out as well. Yep. Now, of course, when it's all said and done, we're going to clean this surface up really well before we put the new gasket on there. But let's just take a look at our timing chain, and we're going to flick at it a little bit, and we're going to see if there's actually any looseness to it. It should be taut. And you know what? It is pretty taut. And you guys can't really see, but if I grab onto the pins here, I can move the chain up and down a little bit. I don't know if that is the source of our rattle or not. It's very suspect. I just don't know. Now, looking at our pickup rotor, there is a timing mark. It's right here, and it's the letter T for timing. This T needs to be in line with a timing mark that is on the case, and it is obscured by old gasket material. Can you see that tick mark right there? It is right there. Can you see that little line, that little notch? That's the timing mark. Now, in order to get an accurate measurement on your valve clearances, each piston has to be at top dead center. You start with piston number 1 with the T on your timing mark. Now, the little nut on this pickup rotor is a size 12 socket. You go clockwise, that's the way the engine turns, and we're going to turn this thing until that timing mark again is with that timing mark there. The idea here is that we achieve top dead center for piston number 1. All right. Now, there's a way to verify. Again, we have other tick marks we need to reference. So that's in line. This is the exhaust cam because it's on the exhaust side of the engine. The other one's the intake cam. It's on the intake side of the engine. You see here, the letter E. When we looked at it a minute ago, it was the letter I for intake. Now it's E for exhaust. That tick mark is in line with the head. We know that it is at top dead center on piston cylinder number 1. Now, also mentioned in the manual is that another indicator of top dead center is the cam lobes on cylinder number 1 will be facing away from each other. Now you can see that lobe profile is facing outward, right? It's facing to the right. The other one on the exhaust cam is also facing outward. That one's facing to the left. Alright, so timing marks are all lined up on the pickup rotor and the camshaft sprockets, and our lobes are facing opposite each other, that way and that way, indicating for sure that cylinder number 1, the piston, is at top dead center. Now, once we get the measurement on the valve clearances for piston number 1, we will rotate our assembly 180 degrees. That means that the timing mark will go from the other timing mark here, it'll spin all the way around 180 degrees, facing exactly the opposite direction from the timing case mark. And that will be cylinder number 2. That piston will be at top dead center. 180 degrees more back to the original timing mark will be cylinder 4, top dead center. Not 3, but 4. The correct sequence to check valve clearances on this engine is 1, 2, 4, 3. Then a final 180 degrees will bring cylinder and piston number 3 to top dead center. And then the final 180 degrees will bring our timing mark all the way back around to the timing case mark, and that will be cylinder number 1, again, that piston at top dead center. Also, that is all in your service manual. They even give you a handy little chart illustrating it for you. It's all in there, guys.